6-year-old Molly Fisher raced through the corridors of City General Hospital with the enthusiasm of a true detective. And her blonde pigtails flew behind her back, and her eyes sparkled with anticipation of another victory over her mother in their favorite game of hide-and-seek. Today was special. It was May 1st, and her mother, Nurse Helen Pfizer, had brought her daughter to work while the daycare center was closed for the holidays. "Mommy will never find me," Molly whispered to herself, pressing against the cool wall of the hospital corridor. The girl knew every nook and cranny of the third floor where her mother worked. Over the past 2 years, she had studied every corner of the intensive care unit. She knew where the gurney stood, which rooms stored clean linens, and even remembered the names of all the patients who lay in the rooms permanently. But today, Molly decided to venture further than usual. At the end of the corridor was a special room number 13. Millionaire Konstantin Goldberg had been lying there for 6 months. Mom had told her that he had been in a car accident last fall and had been in a coma ever since. The room was under round-the-clock surveillance, but the guard often stepped away to smoke or drink coffee. That's where Mom definitely won't think to look. Molly rejoiced. She carefully crept down the corridor, trying not to clatter her pink sneakers on the linoleum. There was no guard at room number 13, and he must have gone for another smoke break. Molly had already reached out to the door when she heard a muffled female voice. "Yes, I increased the dosage," a woman was saying on the phone. "No, Anne. The doctors won't notice. They don't even suspect my visits." Molly froze. The voice sounded calm, but there was something coldly determined about it. "It will all be over soon," the stranger continued. "A week at most." The girl pressed against the door and carefully opened it a few centimeters. What she saw made her open her mouth in horror. By the bedside of the unconscious man stood an elegant woman about 35 years old. She was dressed in an expensive black suit, and her dark hair was neatly arranged in a strict hairstyle. In her hands was a medical syringe, which she was carefully inserting into the drip. "Uncle Konstantin, forgive me," the woman whispered, putting away her phone and leaning over the motionless face of the millionaire. "But this is the only way." Molly couldn't move. She saw the woman adding something to the drip and understood this was bad, very bad. Suddenly the woman turned toward the door. Molly panicked and jumped back, but it was too late. Their eyes met. The stranger looked at her with surprise and alarm, while Molly felt goosebumps running down her spine. "Little girl, who are you looking for?" the woman asked quickly, hiding the syringe in her purse. But Molly was no longer listening. She turned around and ran down the corridor as fast as her legs could carry her. Behind her, she could hear hurried footsteps. The woman was trying to catch up with her. "Stop, girl, stop!" the stranger shouted, but Molly was faster. She turned the corner and flew straight into her mother's arms. "Mommy!" She pressed against her mother's white coat. "Molly, sweetheart." "What happened?" Helen Fisher asked in alarm, hugging her daughter. "You were playing hide and seek. Why are you crying?" "Mom, there's a woman. She's giving bad shots to Uncle Konstantin." Molly sobbed through her tears. Helen frowned. She knew her daughter well. Molly never lied or fantasized. If the girl said she saw something strange, then that's what happened. "What woman?" "Molly, tell me everything in order." She was talking on the phone that she increased the dose and that everything would be over soon. And then I saw her inject something into Uncle Konstantin's fore. Molly wiped her tears with the sleeve of her yellow sweater. Helen felt a chill run down her spine. Konstantin Goldberg had been lying in their unit for 6 months, and his condition was stable. No outside medications had been prescribed for him. Moreover, access to him was strictly limited. "Mom, and she saw me." Molly sobbed and tried to chase me. At that moment, that very woman appeared from around the corner. She walked slowly, looking around. Seeing Helen with Molly, she headed straight toward them. "Excuse me." The stranger addressed Helen with a charming smile. "And your daughter didn't happen to go into room number 13, did she?" "I'm visiting my relative there and noticed the door was ajar." Helen carefully studied the woman. Expensive clothes, well-groomed hands, and confident manner, but there was anxiety in her eyes. "And who are you?" Helen asked directly. "Patient Goldberg has strict visiting rules." "I'm his niece, Victoria Goldberg," the woman introduced herself, "and I have special permission from the chief physician." Molly pressed closer to her mother. She recognized the voice. This was exactly the woman she had seen by the millionaire's bedside. "And your daughter is very curious," Victoria noted, looking intently at Molly. "I hope she wasn't frightened." "No, everything's fine," Helen answered firmly. "Molly was just playing hide and seek." "And Victoria nodded and headed toward the exit, but at the elevator, she turned around and looked once more at the mother and daughter. There was something troubling in her gaze. "And when the woman disappeared in the elevator, Helen knelt down in front of her daughter. "Molly, tell me once more what exactly you saw and heard." Molly recounted everything in detail, and both the phone conversation and how Victoria was injecting something into the fore. Helen listened, and her heart grew more and more troubled. At the end of her shift, when Molly was already sleeping on the couch in the staff room, Helen decided to check Konstantin Goldberg's room. She quietly opened the door and went inside. The man lay motionless, connected to numerous machines. His face was pale but peaceful. Helen checked before everything looked normal, but next to the nightstand, she noticed a small glass vial. Picking it up, she saw that the vial was empty, but traces of some transparent liquid remained at the bottom. There was nothing written on the label. "Strange," Helen whispered, hiding the vial in her coat pocket. She looked at the sleeping millionaire's face and suddenly noticed something unusual. His eyelids were slightly twitching, and barely noticeable drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. In 6 months of observation, she had never seen such reactions from him. Helen quickly checked the readings of all the devices. The pulse was slightly elevated, but not critically. Blood pressure was normal. Body temperature was slightly elevated, but doctors would attribute this to the body's normal reaction. But the nurse with 20 years of experience felt something had changed, and these changes began exactly today after the mysterious niece's visit. Returning to the staff room, Helen carefully woke her daughter. "Molly, sweetheart, it's time to go home." Molly sleepily rubbed her eyes and looked at her mother. "Mommy, will Uncle Konstantin live?" "Of course he will," Helen reassured her, but she was no longer sure of this herself. On the way home, they were silent. Molly looked out the bus window and thought about the strange woman, and Helen turned the mysterious vial in her hands and wondered whether she should tell the chief physician about everything. At home, when Molly had already gone to bed, Helen sat in the kitchen for a long time with a cup of tea. She tried to understand what was really happening in room number 13. And most importantly, could she completely trust her daughter's words? But the more she thought about it, the more convinced she became. Molly couldn't have made up such details. The girl had really seen something, and this something concerned a person's life and death. Outside the window, a warm May night was falling, and Helen Fisher made a decision tomorrow. She would definitely find out the truth about the mysterious niece of the millionaire. The next day, Helen came to work earlier than usual. Molly stayed home with their neighbor, Mrs. Garcia. After yesterday's events, Helen didn't want to bring her daughter to the hospital. First thing, she went to Konstantin Goldberg's room. The man's condition had noticeably changed. He looked restless. His eyebrows were furrowed. His lips moved slightly, and his fingers twitched from time to time. And such brain activity had not been observed in all 6 months of the coma. Interesting, Helen whispered, checking the monitor readings. And she recorded all the data in her notebook and went to the chief physician of the department, Michael Thompson. He was an experienced doctor of pre-retirement age who had worked in this hospital for 30 years. And Mr. Thompson, may I speak with you? Helen knocked on the office door. Of course, Helen, come in. Helen told the chief physician about yesterday's incident, omitting only the details of what Molly had seen. And she said only that she had noticed changes in Goldberg's condition after his niece's visit. Victoria Goldberg? Thompson asked. Yes, she did receive permission for visits. A very respectable woman, and a candidate of chemical sciences. She works for a pharmaceutical company, and does she come often? As far as I know, every day. A very devoted niece. Thompson paused and added, What's the problem? And did something happen to Constantine? Helen showed the doctor her notes. Thompson carefully studied the data and frowned. Indeed, strange. There haven't been such indicators in 6 months, and we'll need to conduct additional examinations. Mr. Thompson, what do you know about the Goldberg family? Helen asked cautiously. And the chief physician leaned back in his chair and looked thoughtfully out the window. A complicated story. Constantine is a very wealthy man, owner of several factories and retail chains. And his wife died 5 years ago, no children. He has a younger brother, Vladimir, but he died in a plane crash about 10 years ago. He left a daughter, that same Victoria, so Victoria is the only heir. Not quite. And Constantine has other relatives, cousins, and a sister. After the accident, they all showed up and are very interested in his condition. Thompson shook his head. You know how it is with rich people. And while a person is healthy, relatives don't remember him. But when trouble strikes, there they are. Helen nodded. She herself had seen how some patients' relatives behaved when it came to inheritance. And Victoria, how does she treat her uncle? Judging by everything, she genuinely cares. Constantine raised her after her father's death, gave her an education, helped her get a job. She owes him a lot. And after the conversation with the chief physician, Helen felt even more confused. It turned out that Victoria Goldberg was a successful woman who loved her uncle. Why would she poison him? And maybe Molly had mixed something up after all. Children sometimes imagine things that aren't there. But in the evening, when Helen was picking up her daughter from Mrs. Garcia's, Molly met her with an unusual question. Mommy, did Uncle Constantine feel better today? How do you know? Helen was surprised. And I was thinking about him all night, and for some reason, it seems to me that that lady is helping him, not harming him. Helen knelt down in front of her daughter. Molly, please explain why you think so. And well, she said there, Uncle Constantine, forgive me. If she wanted to hurt him, would she ask for forgiveness? And she also said, this is the only way. Maybe she wants to cure him, the girl reasoned. And Helen was amazed by her daughter's logic. Indeed, the words forgive me, and the only way could be interpreted differently. What if Victoria wasn't trying to harm her uncle, but on the contrary, save him? And at home, Helen decided to conduct a small investigation. She turned on the computer and began searching for information about Victoria Goldberg on the internet. And what she found made her reconsider her suspicions. Victoria Goldberg was indeed a candidate of chemical sciences specializing in the development of pharmaceutical drugs. Moreover, she worked for a large pharmaceutical company as a leading researcher. On the company's website was her photo and brief biography. Victoria Goldberg is engaged in developing experimental drugs for treating coma states. Her research in the field of neuropharmacology has received recognition from the international scientific community. Well, this is something, Helen whispered. It turned out that the millionaire's niece was a specialist precisely in those diseases that her uncle suffered from. And if she was really injecting him with some drugs, it wasn't for the purpose of murder, but for treatment. But then, why was she doing it secretly? Why didn't she inform the doctors? Helen continued searching and came across an article from 2 years ago in a medical journal. Victoria Goldberg described the results of her experiments with a new drug that could bring people out of deep comas. But clinical trials had not yet been completed, and the medicine had not received official approval for use. So she's testing her medicine on her uncle. Helen realized, but that's illegal. On the other hand, if official medicine was powerless and the person had a chance for salvation. Helen closed the computer and thought. The situation turned out to be much more complex than she had imagined. Victoria Goldberg wasn't a criminal, but a desperate niece, trying to save her uncle by the only available means. But did she have the right to take such a risk? And what would happen if the experiment failed? The next morning, Helen decided to talk to Victoria personally. She waited for her usual visit time around noon and approached room number 13. Victoria was just leaving the room. Seeing Helen, she tensed slightly. "Good afternoon," Helen said. "May I speak with you?" "About what?" Victoria asked wearily. "About your uncle. About what you're doing for him." Victoria's face palled. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "I know you're giving him experimental medications," Helen said quietly. "My daughter saw you the day before yesterday." Victoria closed her eyes and sighed heavily. "And now what? Will you report to the chief physician?" "That depends on what you tell me," Helen replied. They went to a small restroom at the end of the corridor. Victoria sat in a chair and was silent for a long time, choosing her words. "Uncle Constantine is the only person I have left," she began. "When my father died, my uncle became everything to me. He gave me a home, education, believed in my abilities." "I know." Helen nodded. "When he got into the accident, the doctors immediately said there was little chance. Too serious a head injury, but I couldn't just sit and wait." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I spent 2 years developing a drug that can restore damaged neural connections. It showed excellent results on animals, but clinical trials, they would take years, and Uncle might not wait. Every day of coma reduces his chances of recovery." Helen nodded understandingly. She herself was a mother and knew what a loving woman was capable of for saving a loved one. "And the other relatives, do they know about your experiments?" Victoria's face darkened. "The other relatives have already made arrangements with lawyers about dividing the inheritance. They're waiting for the doctors to declare Uncle hopeless and disconnect the life support machines." "And when should this happen?" "Next week." The chief physician said that if there's no positive dynamics within 7 days, then Victoria couldn't finish the sentence. Helen felt her heart squeeze. It turned out Victoria only had 7 days left to save her uncle and your drug. "Will it help?" "I don't know," Victoria admitted honestly. "But over these days, I've seen changes that weren't there for 6 months. He started reacting to voices. His brain activity increased." "Yes, I noticed that too," Helen agreed. "Will you help me?" Victoria asked unexpectedly. Helen was confused. Helping with illegal medical experiments was a serious violation. But on the other hand, it was about saving a human life. "I'll think about it," she promised. That evening at home, Helen told Molly about her conversation with Victoria. The girl listened attentively, sometimes asking clarifying questions. "Mommy, and if her medicine helps Uncle Constantine recover, will she become famous?" Molly asked. "Probably yes. And if it doesn't help, then she might be put in for conducting experiments without permission," Molly thought. So, she's brave. It seems so. Then I'm for her, the girl declared decisively. We should help her, Helen smiled. All right, she said. Tomorrow I'll talk to Victoria again. For now, Anne. Helen decided to conduct her own small investigation and find out who else among Goldberg's relatives was interested in the millionaire's condition. And most importantly, Anne, were they really in such a hurry to get the inheritance as Victoria claimed? On Wednesday morning, Helen came to work early to observe the visitors to room number 13. To her surprise, Anne, she discovered that Victoria wasn't the only one visiting the Coma's millionaire. At 9:30, a middle-aged man in an expensive gray suit approached the room. He had a full face and dark hair. Anne. Helen had never seen him before, but from his manner of behavior, she understood this was clearly a relative of Goldberg's. Excuse me, she addressed the man. Are you here to see patient Goldberg? Yes, Anne. I'm his cousin, Edgar Goldberg. The visitor introduced himself. And you're his nurse? Helen Fisher, she nodded. I take care of your cousin. How is his condition? Edgar asked. Anne. But there wasn't much care in his voice. Stable but serious, Helen replied, observing the man's reaction. I see. And what do the doctors think are their chances for recovery? Anne, you'd better talk to the chief physician about that. Edgar nodded and went into the room. Helen remained in the corridor, listening to what was happening inside. Well, Constantine, Anne, Edgar was saying in a rather indifferent tone. You've been lying here for 6 months already. The doctors say things are bad. Maybe it's enough suffering. Helen frowned. Anne, such conversations with Coma's patients were unacceptable. The medical research showed that people in comas could hear and understand speech. 10 minutes later, Anne, Edgar came out of the room and headed to the elevator. On the way, he was talking on the phone. The condition hasn't changed, Anne. Doctor said that next week they'll be making a decision about disconnecting the machines. Yes, I understand. We need to prepare all the documents. When the man disappeared in the elevator, Anne, Helen went to Constantine Goldberg. He lay as usual, but the device readings were worse than in the morning. His pulse had quickened. Blood pressure had risen slightly. Anne, can he really hear these conversations? Helen whispered. During lunch break, an expensive foreign car drove up to the hospital from which an elegant woman, about 50 years old, got out. Anne, she was dressed expensively, and her fingers were adorned with massive gold rings. Who else is this? Helen thought, watching from the window. Anne. The woman went up to the department and confidently headed to room number 13. Helen intercepted her at the door. Excuse me, are you here to see Goldberg? I'm Laura Goldberg. Constantine's cousin, Anne, the woman replied coldly. I have every right to visit a sick relative. Of course, Helen agreed. I just wanted to warn you that the patient is very sensitive to sounds and conversations. Anne, Laura snorted contemptuously. He hasn't heard or understood anything for 6 months already. Stop deceiving yourself. The woman went into the room, and Helen again remained to eavesdrop. Well, brother, Anne, Laura was saying in a not at all kind tone. Aren't you tired of ruining everyone's life? You lie here like a vegetable, and we all wait for when you'll finally free up some space. Helen clenched her fists, and such heartlessness outraged her to the core. You know, Constantine, Laura continued, your precious niece runs around here every day. She probably thinks she'll get the whole inheritance. Not so fast, and we have rights too. A few minutes later, the woman came out of the room with a satisfied look. Passing by Helen, she stopped. Have you worked here long? Laura asked. 20 years, Helen replied. And then tell me honestly, does Constantine have any chances? Helen looked the woman in the eyes and saw cold calculation there. I'm not a doctor. You need to ask specialists about that, I see. Laura nodded. And Denise keeps hoping for a miracle. It's time to accept the truth. When Laura left, Helen again checked Constantine's condition. The device readings became even worse. His pulse was elevated, and signs of stress appeared on the monitor. He hears them. Helen realized and understands what they're saying. That evening, picking up Molly from Mrs. Garcia's, Helen told her daughter what she had seen during the day. "Mommy, why do they speak so badly to Uncle Constantine?" Molly was upset. "He's sick, because they want to get his money," Helen explained. "And for that, Uncle Constantine must die. How evil they are, and Aunt Victoria is kind. She wants to cure him." "Yes, sweetheart, but her medicine might be dangerous." Molly thought, "Mommy, what's more dangerous? Her medicine or these evil uncles and aunts?" Her daughter's question made Helen think seriously. Indeed, what was worse? Risky experimental treatment or slow psychological murder by greedy relatives. The next day, Thursday, Helen decided to talk to the chief physician about what she had observed. "Mr. Thompson, I noticed that patient Goldberg's condition worsens after visits from certain relatives," she said. "What do you mean?" Thompson frowned. Helen told about the visits from Edgar and Laura, about their conversations with the Comoma's patient, and the device's reactions. "This is serious," the chief physician agreed. "Indeed, people in comas often hear and understand what's happening around them. Negative information can worsen their condition. Can visits be restricted? Formally, they have the right to visit their relative, but I'll talk to them and explain how to behave properly and what will happen if there's no improvement by Monday." Thompson sighed heavily. "The medical council will make a decision about stopping artificial life support. 6 months of coma with such injuries is a critical period. And then Mr. Goldberg will die within a few hours after the machines are disconnected." Helen felt her heart squeeze. It turned out Victoria only had 4 days left to save her uncle. During lunch break, she found Victoria in the corridor near the room. "I need to talk to you," Helen said. They went to the restroom again. "I saw your relatives," Helen began. "Edgar and Laura." Victoria's face darkened. "And what did they say?" "The same as always. That uncle should stop suffering, that it's time to accept the truth." "They're killing him," Victoria said quietly. "Maybe not physically, but morally. And he hears them. I'm sure, I think so too." After their visits, the device readings get worse. You see, Victoria got nervous. And they're also persuading the doctors to make the decision about disconnecting the machines faster. Edgar talked to the chief physician yesterday, and what did he say? That the family is ready for the sad outcome. That there is no point in prolonging the patient's suffering. Victoria sobbed. They presented it as if the whole family unanimously considers Uncle hopeless. "And you didn't object?" "Of course I objected, but I'm alone against everyone. Besides, I can't tell about my experiments." Helen was silent, thinking about the situation. "Victoria, does your medicine really help?" "Yes. Over these days, Uncle has become much more active. Yesterday, I even saw him try to open his eyes. And the day before yesterday, his fingers clenched when I took his hand. But officially, the doctors don't notice this. They only look at the device readings. And these changes are very subtle. They can only be noticed with constant observation." Helen made a decision. "All right, I'll help you." "Really?" Victoria rejoiced. "But on one condition, I want to know everything about your medicine. What it is, how it works, what the consequences might be." Victoria nodded. "Of course, the drug is called neurogenine. It stimulates the growth of new neural connections and restores damaged brain areas. The base is stem cells and special proteins. And side effects, in the worst case, complete destruction of brain activity. That is final brain death." Victoria admitted honestly. Helen felt a chill down her spine. "So, you risk killing your uncle?" "Yes, but if we do nothing, he'll die on Monday anyway. And this way, he has a chance." "What chance? In percentages? 50-50? Victoria answered quietly. Helen thought. 50% wasn't so little for a hopeless patient. And how much time is needed for the course of treatment? 3 more days. If there's no result by Sunday, it means it won't help. And if it helps, Uncle will start regaining consciousness. First, he'll react to voices, then open his eyes, and then speak. Helen imagined the chief physician's face when the hopeless patient would suddenly start recovering. And she also thought about the faces of the greedy relatives. "All right," she said finally. "I'll help you monitor your uncle's condition and make sure Edgar and Laura don't upset him too much." "Thank you," Victoria rejoiced. "You can't imagine how important this is to me and Molly. My daughter wants to help Uncle Constantine. Let her come." Children's voices have a good effect on coma's patients. That evening at home, Helen told Molly about her decision. "Hooray!" the girl rejoiced. "We're going to save Uncle Constantine." "But remember, Molly," her mother said, "seriously, this is very responsible. If we make a mistake, Uncle Constantine might die. But if we don't help, he'll definitely die on Monday," the girl reasonably noted. "Right, that's why we'll try. And can I talk to him?" "Of course. Talk to him about good things, about the sun, about flowers, about how beautiful it is outside." "Good. And I'll sing him a song too." Helen smiled. Her daughter always knew how to find joy, even in the most difficult situations. The next day, Friday, Anne would begin the decisive stage in the fight for Constantine Goldberg's life, and Helen and Molly would become allies of the desperate niece in her risky experiment. On Friday morning, Helen brought Molly to work with her. The girl was unusually serious for her 6 years. She understood that important work lay ahead. "Mommy, will Uncle Constantine know that I came?" Molly asked on the way to the hospital. "Possibly, sweetheart. People in comas sometimes feel the presence of other people. Then I'll be very kind and cheerful, so he'll feel good." First thing, they went to room number 13. Constantine Goldberg lay motionless, but Helen noticed that his face looked a bit better than yesterday. His skin wasn't as pale, and his breathing seemed more even. "Hello, Uncle Constantine," the girl greeted quietly. "My name is Molly. I'm the daughter of Nurse Helen, who takes care of you." Helen carefully watched the device readings. When Molly spoke, the millionaire's pulse slightly quickened, but not critically, more like a reaction to a pleasant sound. "Uncle Constantine, do you know that today is a very beautiful day?" The girl continued. "The sun is shining outside, apple trees are blooming, and in the park, there's already green grass. Mom said that summer is coming soon, and we'll be able to swim in the river." Barely noticeable changes appeared on the monitor in brain activity. Helen recorded the readings in her notebook. "Molly," she called her daughter, "sit with Uncle Constantine, and I'll go get some needed papers." Actually, Helen wanted to find Victoria and tell her about Uncle's reaction to Molly's voice. Victoria was in the corridor studying some medical charts. "Good morning," Helen greeted. "How are things with the treatment?" "So far, everything is going according to plan," Victoria replied. "Yesterday evening I administered another dose. Today should be the maximum effect, and my daughter is talking to him now. The devices show a positive reaction." Victoria's face lit up with hope. "Really? That's a very good sign. It means the brain is starting to respond to external stimuli. And when do you plan the next injection?" "Today at 2 o'clock. This will be the penultimate dose." "Good. I'll make sure no one interferes." At that moment, the department head, Anna Peterson, approached him, a strict woman of pre-retirement age. "Helen," she addressed the nurse, "what is the child doing here?" "This is my daughter, Mrs. Peterson. The daycare center is closed for repairs. The hospital is no place for children," the head noted with displeasure. "But she's not bothering anyone," Victoria interceded. "On the contrary, her voice has a good effect on my uncle." Anna Peterson looked at Victoria attentively, And you visit us often, every day. I'm the only one who genuinely cares about Uncle, I see. And the other relatives? The others are waiting for his death, Victoria said bitterly. The head frowned. She was an experienced doctor and understood perfectly what happened in families where big money was at stake. All right, she said to Helen. Let the girl stay, but make sure she doesn't make noise. When Anna Peterson left, Victoria sighed with relief. At least someone understands the situation. Does the head know about your experiments? Helen asked quietly. No. Of course not, Anne. But she sees how Edgar and Laura behave and she doesn't like it. At 11, Edgar Goldberg came to the department again. This time he wasn't alone. With him came a man in an expensive suit with a briefcase. Anne. That's a lawyer, Victoria whispered to Helen. They're preparing inheritance documents. Edgar went straight to the chief physician, and the lawyer remained waiting in the corridor. Anne. Helen approached Thompson's office and listened to the conversation. Mr. Thompson, Edgar was saying, the family is ready to make the difficult decision. Anne. We understand that Constantine will never return to normal life. Mr. Goldberg, the decision is made by a medical council, not relatives, the chief physician replied. Of course, Anne. But we don't want him to suffer. It's been 6 months already, and what does his niece think? Victoria Goldberg regularly visits her uncle. Victoria is too emotional, Edgar said dismissively. Anne. She can't soberly assess the situation. Besides, she's the only one in the family who still hopes for a miracle. I see. Well, the decision will be made on Monday, Anne. Helen hurried away from the door, so as not to be caught eavesdropping. Edgar came out of the office with a satisfied look and headed to his uncle's room. Well, Constantine, Anne. He addressed the coma's patient with his usual indifference. Everything will be over on Monday. Stop suffering already. At that moment, Molly entered the room. Anne. The girl heard Edgar's words and was indignant. Uncle, why do you talk to Uncle Constantine like that? He's sick. Edgar looked at the girl with surprise. And who are you? I'm Molly. And you're mean, Molly? Anne. Helen hurried into the room. Excuse me, this is my daughter. Remove the child from the room, Edgar said with displeasure. This isn't a playground, and you don't yell at Uncle Constantine. Molly persisted. Anne. He already feels bad. Helen took her daughter by the hand and led her out of the room. But Molly managed to notice the main thing. When she spoke, a barely noticeable shadow of a smile appeared on the millionaire's face. Mom, Uncle Constantine smiled. Molly whispered excitedly in the corridor. Really? Yes, Anne. When I said that the mean uncle shouldn't yell at him, the corners of Uncle Constantine's mouth went up. Helen felt excitement overwhelm her. If Molly was right, then Victoria's medicine was really working. Anne. 10 minutes later, Edgar left the room and headed to the elevator with the lawyer. Helen waited for them to leave and went to Constantine. The device readings were better than in the morning. Moreover, Anne. She noticed that the millionaire's eyelids were slightly trembling, as if he was trying to open them. Victoria, she called Denise. The woman quickly approached the room. What happened? Look at your uncle, Anne. And at the device readings, Victoria leaned over the bed and carefully examined her uncle's face. Then she studied the monitor data. My God, she whispered. This is incredible, Anne. Brain activity has increased by 30% compared to the morning. And Molly says he smiled when she stood up for him. That means he not only hears, but understands what's happening. Victoria rejoiced. Anne. The medicine is working. Then continue the treatment. Absolutely, in 2 hours, the next injection. At 2, Victoria gave her uncle another injection of her experimental drug. Anne. Helen watched in the corridor to make sure no one entered the room at an inappropriate moment. Done, Victoria said, coming out of the room. Now we wait. How long do we wait? If the drug works, Anne, the effect should manifest within a few hours. By evening, the changes became obvious. Even to a non-spiced, Konstantin Goldberg had clearly become more active. His fingers moved from time to time, and his eyelids trembled and his breathing became deeper and more even. "Uncle Konstantin," Molly called quietly, "if you hear me, move your finger." And a miracle happened. And the millionaire's index finger on his right hand slightly curved. "Mom," Molly whispered excitedly. "He hears me." Helen and Victoria exchanged glances. The medicine was really working. And "Uncle Konstantin," Victoria addressed him. "This is me, Victoria. I'm trying to cure you. If you understand me, squeeze my hand." She took her uncle's palm in her hands and felt a weak but distinct squeeze. "And he's coming around," Victoria whispered through tears. "My drug is working," but the joy was premature. The chief physician unexpectedly entered the room, accompanied by Edgar and Laura. "And what's happening here?" Thompson was surprised, seeing Victoria and Helen with Molly by the patient's bedside. "Mr. Thompson," Victoria said excitedly, "Uncle is starting to regain consciousness, and he reacts to voices, moves his fingers." Edgar and Laura exchanged distrustful looks. "That's impossible," Edgar said. "Half an hour ago, he was lying like dead." "Check for yourself," Victoria suggested, and Thompson approached the bed and conducted standard reaction tests. To his surprise, Konstantin's pupils reacted to light, and his pulse quickened with pain stimuli. "Indeed surprising," and the chief physician muttered. "There haven't been such reactions in 6 months. Maybe it's a temporary improvement." Laura suggested, "Possibly. We need to observe." "And couldn't the council's decision be postponed?" Victoria asked. "If there are improvements, we'll see what happens tomorrow," Thompson promised. Edgar and Laura left the room clearly dissatisfied, and their plans for quickly obtaining the inheritance were beginning to crumble. "Nothing," Laura whispered to her brother in the corridor. "One day won't make a difference. They'll still disconnect him on Monday." But they didn't know that Victoria had one more day to completely cure her uncle. And now she had reliable allies, Nurse Helen and Molly, who were ready to help in the fight for Konstantin Goldberg's life. And Saturday began with trouble. As soon as Helen and Molly entered the hospital, the chief physician intercepted them. "Helen, I need to speak with you," Thompson said seriously. They went to his office, and Molly remained waiting in the corridor. "Last night, I received a call from Edgar Goldberg," the chief physician began. "He complains that you allow your daughter to interfere with relatives' visits." And "Molly doesn't bother anyone," Helen objected. "She just talks to the patient." Edgar also claims that the niece Victoria behaves inadequately, and allegedly inventing non-existent improvements in her uncle's condition. Helen felt her heart squeeze. Were Edgar and Laura trying to remove Victoria from her uncle's treatment? "Mr. Thompson, did you yourself see the improvements yesterday evening?" "Yes, some reactions did appear, but this might be a temporary phenomenon." "And if it's not temporary," Thompson was silent, "and then the council will reconsider the decision about disconnecting the machines." He looked at Helen attentively. "Helen, you're not involved in any non-standard treatment methods, are you?" "What do you mean?" the nurse asked cautiously. "Well, I don't know. Folk remedies, homeopathy, something like that." Helen understood that the chief physician suspected something wrong, but couldn't yet formulate his suspicions precisely. "No, of course not. I just carefully monitor the patient's condition." "Good. Then continue working, but make sure your daughter doesn't create problems with the relatives." Coming out of the office, Helen found Molly in the corridor. The girl was sitting on a bench and looked upset. "What happened, sunshine?" "Mommy, isn't Aunt Victoria coming today?" "Why do you think so?" "Because the mean uncles are planning something bad. I heard them talking near the elevator." "And what did they say?" "That they need to not let Aunt Victoria see Uncle Konstantin. And that if she talks about improvements again, she'll be completely banned from entering the hospital. Helen frowned. And so Edgar and Laura were seriously taking up the elimination of the niece, and today Victoria was supposed to make the last decisive injection. Molly, let's go to Uncle Constantine, and we'll talk to him while no one's there. They went into room number 13. Constantine Goldberg looked significantly better than yesterday. His face had slightly pink, his breathing was even, and the device readings were stable. "Good morning, Uncle Constantine," Molly greeted quietly. "How are you feeling?" In response, the millionaire's fingers moved slightly. "Uncle Constantine," the girl continued, "Aunt Victoria is trying very hard to cure you, and the mean uncles want you not to get better. But Mom and I will help you." Helen carefully watched the monitor readings, and when Molly mentioned Victoria, the pulse quickened, and when she talked about the mean uncles, signs of stress appeared on the screen. "He understands everything," Helen whispered. At that moment, Victoria quickly entered the room. She looked agitated and frightened. "Helen, I need help," she immediately began. "Edgar and Laura have gotten a ban on my visits." "How?" "And they told the chief physician that I'm mentally unbalanced and vent non-existent improvements and interfere with proper treatment. Now the guard has orders not to let me in." Helen felt panic, and without the last injection, all previous efforts might be wasted. "And what did the chief physician say?" "That it's a temporary measure until the situation is clarified. But I don't have time. Today should be the last dose of the drug. Then we'll do the injection ourselves," Helen said decisively. But that's very risky. If something goes wrong, and if we don't do it, Uncle Constantine will definitely die on Monday." Victoria took a small syringe with transparent liquid from her purse. "This is the last dose of neurogenine. It needs to be injected into the very slowly, over 5 minutes. Show me exactly how," Victoria explained the procedure. Helen listened attentively. She had extensive experience with IVs, but this was her first time administering experimental drugs. And what should I do?" Molly asked. "You'll be the lookout," her mother smiled. "Watch to make sure no one comes in." Molly nodded importantly and stood by the door. Helen took the syringe and carefully inserted the needle into the 4-tube. The drug had to flow very slowly to avoid causing shock. "Uncle Constantine," Victoria whispered, leaning over the bed. "This is the last chance. Hold on, please." 2 minutes later, Molly gave the alarm signal. "Mom, someone's coming." Helen accelerated the drug administration. Footsteps and voices could be heard in the corridor. "And faster," Victoria whispered. "Almost done," Helen replied, trying to stay calm. At the last moment, when the syringe was empty, Edgar and Laura entered the room accompanied by a guard. And what are you doing here?" Edgar asked suspiciously. "Checking the 4, Helen replied calmly, hiding the syringe in her coat pocket. "And this woman?" Edgar pointed at Victoria. "She's forbidden to come here." "I was escorting her to the exit," Helen lied. "Victoria Goldberg, you're violating the chief physician's order," the guard said sternly. "Please leave the department." Victoria looked at her uncle, and then at Helen and Molly. "All right, I'm leaving. But I'll be waiting for news." When Victoria left, Edgar carefully examined the room. "Where was the child when you were checking the 4? "Molly is always with me," Helen replied. "Strange, it seemed to me she was standing by the door like a guard." Laura approached the bed and looked at the patient with displeasure. "Well, Constantine?" "Still pretending to be alive," she said with malice. "Don't think these performances will help. Everything will still be over on Monday." Helen noticed with horror that the device reading sharply worsened. Pulse quickened, blood pressure jumped. "Excuse me," she addressed the relatives, "but the patient needs rest." "We have the right to visit our relative," Edgar replied coldly. "Of course. But you shouldn't upset him." "Upset him?" Laura laughed. He hasn't felt anything for 6 months. Uncle, why are you mean to Uncle Constantine? Molly asked unexpectedly. Edgar and Laura looked at the girl with surprise. We're not mean, Edgar said. We're just telling the truth. But truth can be kind and mean. Molly noted. You tell mean truth. What a smart girl is growing up. Laura sneered. Her mommy probably teaches philosophy, and Uncle Constantine is kind. Molly continued, ignoring the sarcasm. I can feel it. And suddenly the incredible happened. Constantine Goldberg slowly opened his eyes. Everyone froze. Edgar and Laura looked at their uncle with horror, Helen with delight, and Molly smiled joyfully. Uncle Constantine woke up. The girl rejoiced. The man struggled to turn his head and looked at the people standing around his bed. His gaze was still cloudy, but definitely conscious. What is happening? He whispered in a hoarse voice. Laura was the first to recover from shock. Constantine, thank God you woke up. She falsely rejoiced, but Constantine looked at her with incomprehension, then shifted his gaze to Edgar. There was no joy in his eyes at meeting his relatives. Where is Victoria? He said weakly. Victoria can't come right now, Edgar said quickly. But the main thing is that you woke up. Constantine frowned as if trying to remember something. I heard your voices, he said slowly. You wanted me to be disconnected. Edgar and Laura exchanged glances. They hadn't expected that the patient could hear their conversations. Constantine, you misunderstood. Laura began to justify herself. We were worried. No. The millionaire interrupted her. I heard everything. You were waiting for my death. Helen hurried to call the chief physician. Such a sharp improvement in condition needed to be officially documented, and this girl Constantine struggled to turn to Molly, and she said, Kind words, Uncle Constantine. I'm so glad you woke up. Molly rejoiced. Thank you, little angel. The millionaire smiled. The excited chief physician ran into the room with several doctors. What's happening here? Thompson asked. Constantine is conscious, Helen reported. The doctors immediately began examination. They checked reflexes, asked questions, studied the device readings. Incredible, Thompson muttered. In 30 years of practice, I haven't seen such emergence from a coma after 6 months. Dr. Constantine called weakly. I need to talk to my niece Victoria. Of course, Mr. Goldberg. We'll find her now. Edgar and Laura stood in the corner of the room with confused faces. Their plans had collapsed overnight. We should go, Edgar said. Constantine, we're so glad you recovered. Yes, and of course, glad, the millionaire replied skeptically. When the greedy relatives left, Helen leaned over the bed. Mr. Goldberg, your niece was very worried about you. She did everything possible for your recovery. I know. He nodded. I felt her care. What's your name? Helen Fisher. I'm your nurse. And the girl? My daughter Molly. Thank you, both. Without you, I wouldn't have survived. Molly approached the bed and carefully touched the millionaire's hand. Uncle Constantine, now the mean people can't hurt you. They can't. Constantine smiled. Now I'll know who is my friend and who is my enemy. An hour later, Victoria rushed to the hospital. Learning about the miracle, she couldn't believe her ears. Uncle Constantine, she exclaimed, entering the room. Is this true, Victoria? My dear, Constantine reached out his weak hand to her. You saved my life. I was so afraid I wouldn't make it in time, Victoria cried. The drug might not have worked. What drug? The chief physician was surprised. Victoria and Helen exchanged glances. It was time to reveal the truth about the risky experiment that saved the millionaire's life. Mr. Thompson, Victoria began. I have something to tell you. And she told the doctors the story of her experimental medicine, about the secret injections, and how Nurse Helen and her daughter Molly helped conduct the last decisive procedure. The chief physician listened with amazement, then was silent for a long time, thinking over what he had heard. It was extremely risky, he finally said. But since the result is positive, Anne. Thompson looked at Victoria. Are you ready to provide all data about your drug to the scientific community? Of course, the woman rejoiced. This discovery should help other people, and Konstantin Goldberg, lying on the hospital bed, said weakly but clearly, Victoria, Helen, Molly, my guardian angels, he was saved. But ahead lay more trials, complete health recovery, and dealing with the greedy relatives who had almost divided his inheritance. A week had passed since Konstantin Goldberg's miraculous awakening. The millionaire was recovering quickly. Every day, his condition improved. He could already sit up in bed, speak clearly, and even eat independently. Uncle Konstantin, do you remember how I talked to you when you were sleeping? Molly asked, during another visit. Of course I remember, my little angel. Konstantin smiled. Your voice was like a bright ray of light in the darkness for me. Helen was recording device readings and rejoiced at how the atmosphere in the room had changed. Now peace and hope reigned here instead of the former hopelessness. Helen the millionaire addressed her. I want to talk to you about serious matters. I'm listening. When I was in the coma, I heard and understood a lot. I know that you risked your career helping Victoria conduct experiments. We simply couldn't do otherwise. That's exactly why I want to thank you. Konstantin looked seriously at the nurse. I have a proposal. What kind? I'm planning to open a private clinic that will use the most modern treatment methods. Would you like to become its head nurse? Helen was confused. Such an offer exceeded all her dreams. But I don't have sufficient qualifications. But you have the main things: heart and devotion to the profession. Everything else can be learned. And what about Molly? There will be a daycare center for employees' children at the clinic. Konstantin smiled. I thought about that too. At that moment, Victoria entered the room. She looked happy and simultaneously tired. The recent days had been very stressful for her. Uncle Konstantin, I have excellent news, she announced. What news? The Scientific Council approved my drug for clinical trials, and 3 major pharmaceutical companies have already offered to buy the patent. That's wonderful, Victoria, her uncle rejoiced. But I won't sell the patent, Victoria continued. I want to independently bring the development to completion, so the medicine will be available to everyone who needs it. Konstantin looked proudly at his niece. I always knew you'd become an outstanding scientist. And also, Victoria added, journalists want to interview us. The story about how a little girl helped save a millionaire has interested many people. Molly blessed with embarrassment. Do I have to tell the journalists? Only if you want to, Konstantin reassured her. But know that you accomplished a real feat. At that time, the chief physician looked into the room. Mr. Goldberg, you have visitors. Your relatives are asking permission for a meeting. The millionaire's face darkened. Edgar and Laura. Yes. They say they were very worried about your health. Let them come in. Konstantin sighed heavily. It's time to doubt all the eyes. Edgar and Laura entered the room with guilty faces. They brought flowers and expensive gifts. Konstantin, dear, Laura falsely exclaimed. We're so glad you recovered. Yes, Edgar supported. We were very worried. Konstantin looked at them attentively. Worried? He asked calmly. Interesting. It seemed to me that you were impatiently waiting for my death. Edgar and Laura were embarrassed. Konstantin, you misunderstood us. Laura began to justify. I understood you perfectly, the millionaire interrupted. For 6 months, I heard your conversations about how you divided my inheritance, about how it was time to stop the suffering, about how Victoria is too emotional and prevents making the right decision, but we're relatives. Edgar protested, we have rights, rights. Konstantin sat up in bed, and I have the right to know who wishes me dead. We didn't wish you dead, Laura protested. No. Then explain why you made arrangements with a lawyer about dividing the inheritance even before the council's decision. Constantine took several documents from the nightstand. And here are copies of your court applications to declare me incompetent. Edgar and Laura palled. They hadn't expected their plans to become known. This was just a precaution, Edgar mumbled. And a precaution? Constantine laughed, but the laugh was joyless. You had already disposed of my factories and apartments. Constantine, let's forget these misunderstandings. Laura tried to smooth things over. And the main thing is that you're alive and healthy. Yes, the main thing. And I've made a decision. What decision? About the inheritance. Since you've already shown how you feel about me, I've changed my will. And Edgar and Laura exchanged horrified looks. What do you mean? All my wealth will go to those who really cared about my life. Constantine looked at Victoria, Helen, and Molly. And half the inheritance goes to Victoria, a quarter to Helen, and a quarter is set aside in a special education fund for Molly. But that's unfair. Laura protested. Unfair? Constantine was surprised. And was it fair to wish death on a sick relative? We can challenge the will in court. Edgar threatened. Try it, the millionaire replied calmly. I have recordings of your conversations in this room. Very interesting recordings. Edgar and Laura realized they had lost. Their greed and cruelty had deprived them of the inheritance. Constantine, but we're family. Laura tried pitifully. Family? Constantine shook his head. Family is those who love you not for money, who are ready to risk for your salvation, who speak kind words even when you can't answer. He looked at Molly, who was attentively listening to the adult conversations. This girl became closer to me in a week than you have in your entire lives. Edgar and Laura understood that further arguing was useless. They silently left the room. Uncle Constantine, Molly said quietly when the unpleasant relatives had gone. Don't you regret your decision? Not at all. Constantine smiled. You know what I realized while in the coma? What? That real wealth isn't money, but people who love you. I have a wonderful niece, a faithful nurse, and a little guardian angel. What else do I need for happiness? Victoria hugged her uncle. Thank you for your trust. I'll try to justify it. I don't doubt it, Constantine replied. Now, tell me how things are with the drug. When will official trials begin? In a month, Victoria rejoiced. If everything goes successfully, in a year, the medicine will appear in hospitals. Excellent. That means other people will also be able to get a second chance at life. Uncle Constantine, Molly asked, when will you be discharged from the hospital? The doctors say, in a week. Why do you ask? Mom said you offered her a job at your clinic. That means we'll see each other often. Of course, Constantine laughed. Moreover, I want you to become an honorary consultant in child psychology. What does that mean? It means you'll help doctors understand what little patients feel. Molly nodded importantly. Good. But then I need to study a lot to become a real doctor. That's exactly what the education fund is for, Constantine explained. You'll be able to study at the best schools and universities in the world. Can I study medicine like Aunt Victoria? You can study whatever you want, the millionaire promised. Helen listened to this conversation and couldn't believe what was happening. Just a week ago, she was an ordinary nurse with a modest salary. And now she faced a career in a private clinic and a secure future for her daughter. Mr. Goldberg, she said, we'll never forget your kindness, and I'll never forget your devotion, he replied. You saved my life without expecting reward. That's worth a lot. A warm atmosphere prevailed in the room. For people, the millionaire, a scientist, a nurse, and a 6-year-old girl had become a real family, connected not by blood, but by mutual care and love. And outside the window, the May sun was shining, and life was opening new opportunities and hopes for everyone. 2 weeks later, Konstantin Goldberg was discharged from the hospital. During this time, he had completely restored his physical strength and mental clarity. Moreover, the experience he had lived through radically changed his view of life. "Helen," he said on the day of discharge, "have you thought about the proposal to work at my clinic? Are you ready to start a new life?" "I'm ready," Helen answered without hesitation. "But I need time to properly resign from here. Of course, meanwhile, you can study the plans for the future clinic and make your suggestions." He handed her a folder with documents. "This is the project for the Second Chance Medical Center. Specialization treatment of complex neurological diseases using innovative methods." Helen opened the folder and gasped. The clinic project was impressive in its scale and thoughtfulness. Modern equipment, the best specialists, their own research laboratory. "Are you sure I can handle managing such a large team?" "I'm sure you have the main thing. Understanding that medicine should serve people, not the other way around." Molly was carefully examining the pictures in the project. "Uncle Constantine, will the daycare be next to the clinic?" "Yes, sunshine. I want people to be able to combine work and raising children. Can I visit you at work and mom too?" "Not only can you, but you should. Remember I told you about the position of consultant in child psychology?" Molly nodded importantly. At that time, Victoria approached them. She was in high spirits. "Uncle Constantine, I have wonderful news," she announced. "What news?" "The International Medical Council approved accelerated trials of neurogenine. Usually such procedures take years, but our case was recognized as exceptional." "That's amazing." Constantine rejoiced. "So your medicine will soon help many people?" "Yes, and I've also been invited to speak at an international conference in Switzerland. They want me to tell about the methodology of using neurogenine." "Victoria, I'm so proud of you." Constantine hugged his niece. "Your father would be happy seeing who you've become." "Will you go with Uncle Constantine?" Molly asked Victoria. "Unfortunately, no, Uncle isn't ready for long trips yet, but he promised to help organize a research center here in the city. Right?" Constantine nodded. "Science should develop not only abroad, but at home, too." Chief Physician Thompson approached the group to say goodbye to the discharging patient. "Mr. Goldberg," he said, "in 30 years of work, I've witnessed such a miracle for the first time. Your story will go into medical textbooks. I hope it will help doctors not lose hope, even in the most difficult cases." The millionaire replied, "What will happen to your relatives?" The chief physician asked. "Edar and Laura?" Constantine shrugged. "They made their choice. Now let them live with the consequences." "Uncle Constantine, aren't you angry at them?" Molly asked. "You know, Molly, I realized one important thing. Anger and resentment poison the soul. It's better to forgive and move on." "But they wanted you to die." "Yes, they did. But, thanks to their cruelty, I understood who is really dear to me." Constantine looked at Victoria, Helen, and Molly. "Sometimes bad people help us find good ones." An hour later, they left the hospital. Constantine got into his car, which his driver had brought, while Helen and Molly took the bus home. "Mommy," Molly said on the way, "it seems to me we've gotten into a fairy tale." "Why do you think so?" "Well, we helped Uncle Constantine like good fairies, and he thanked us like a good wizard, and now we'll have a new beautiful life." Helen smiled. Indeed, the recent weeks seemed more like a fairy tale than reality. "Do you know, Molly, what's most important in this story?" "What?" "That good always triumphs over evil. Maybe not immediately, maybe through difficulties, but it triumphs. Our Aunt Victoria and Uncle Constantine." "Good, very good." At home, a surprise awaited them. A courier had brought a large bouquet of flowers and a beautiful box of gifts. "This is from Uncle Constantine." Molly rejoiced, reading the card. In the box were medical books for children, a doctor's kit, and a beautiful doll in a nurse's costume. And for Helen, a certificate for professional development courses and elegant watch. "Mommy, look." Molly opened one of the books. And it says here to Molly's future doctor, from grateful patient Konstantin Goldberg. And on the watch, it's engraved to Helen Angel in a white coat. Helen read. That evening, Victoria called them. "Helen, Anne, tomorrow an architect will come to you. Uncle wants you to choose an apartment in a new building next to the clinic." "But that's too much." Helen was confused. "No, it's not too much, Anne. Uncle says family should live nearby. Are we really family? Of course." Victoria laughed, the most real kind. Not by blood, but by heart. The next day, the architect really came to their home, and he showed plans for a modern residential complex being built near the future clinic. "Mr. Goldberg asked me to offer you a choice of apartments," the architect said, "and here's a 3-bedroom on the 3rd floor with a park view, and here's a 4-bedroom on the 5th. It has a balcony and a separate room that could be made into an office." Molly carefully studied the plans. "And can my room be next to Mom's?" "Of course." The architect smiled. "And the building will also have a playground, gym, and library." "Mommy, I like it." The girl rejoiced. Helen chose the 4-bedroom apartment, and she liked that trees were visible from there, and that there was lots of light. "When can we move in?" she asked. "The building will be ready in 3 months, just in time for the clinic opening." That same evening, and Konstantin invited them all to a restaurant to celebrate their new life. At dinner, he talked about his plans. "The clinic will not only treat people, but also train young doctors, and I want to create a center where science combines with humanity. And I'll head the research laboratory," Victoria added. "We'll develop new medicines for treating complex diseases, and I'll be the head nurse and make sure all patients receive care and attention," Helen said. "And I'll help children not be afraid of doctors," Molly declared importantly. "A wonderful team, and Konstantin smiled. "Uncle Konstantin," Molly said, "seriously, won't you be sad anymore?" "Why should I be sad?" "Well, you realized you don't have real relatives. Only Aunt Victoria." And Konstantin looked at the girl with tenderness. "Molly, do you know what I realized? Family isn't those who were born with you in the same house. Family is those who chose you with their heart. And we chose you, and I chose you. And now I have the best family in the world." Victoria raised her glass. "I propose a toast to our family. May we always stay together and help each other." "To family," and the others picked up, and Molly added, "And may all sick uncles and aunts and children get well to that too." Konstantin laughed. That evening, and for people finally understood that they were connected, not by chance, but by fate, and that ahead of them lay not just new work, but a new life full of meaning and joy. Outside the restaurant window, and the lights of the evening city were lighting up, while in the hearts of the small family burned the warm light of hope and love. A year had passed since the opening of Second Chance Clinic. During this time, and more than 100 patients had been treated here, and the drug neurogenine had gained international recognition. And Victoria became a laureate of a prestigious medical award, while little Molly's story had traveled around the world. At Victoria, Molly asked, leafing through a medical journal, "And is it true that they write about you in all the newspapers?" "Unfortunately, it's true, Victoria. Sometimes it seems to me that journalists are more interested in me than in science. Is that bad?" "Not bad, but it distracts from work. Every day they call with interview offers, invite me to conferences." Konstantin, who was listening to their conversation, noted, "Fame is the price of success. But the main thing is not to forget what we're doing all this for people." Molly answered seriously, "Right, sweetheart." The girl had indeed grown over this year, and now she was 8 years old and studied at a specialized license. "Mom," she said to Helen at breakfast, "can I go see the new patient today?" "What patient?" The girl from Germany. And they brought her yesterday evening. Helen knew about this case. 8-year-old Greta had been in an accident 3 months ago and was in a coma. And German doctors had sent her to the American clinic after learning about the success of neurogenine treatment. You can, but only with doctors' and parents' permission. Good. At the clinic, Molly found the room where the little German girl lay. Next to her sat her parents, a young couple who looked very tired. Good afternoon, Molly greeted. My name is Molly. Oh, you're that girl. And Greta's mother rejoiced. We've heard a lot about you, and I heard about Greta. May I talk to her? Of course, the father allowed. Molly approached the bed and carefully took Greta's hand. Hi, Greta, she said quietly. My name is Molly and I live in America. We have very good doctors here who will help you. Slight changes appeared on the monitor. You know what? I'll tell you. Molly continued. I have a friend, Samuel. He also slept like you and now he's healthy and goes to school. The device readings became more active. Greta, your mom and dad love you very much. They came to us from a far country so you'd get well, and when you wake up, we'll be friends. The parents of the girl watched Molly with admiration. How does she do it? The mother whispered. Probably children understand each other better, even without knowing the language, the father suggested. At that moment, Victoria entered the room. How is our patient doing? She asked. Doctor, look at the readings, Greta's father said excitedly. Victoria studied the monitor data and was surprised. We haven't seen such activity since admission. She looked at Molly. What did you tell her? Ordinary things. That her parents love her. That there are kind doctors here. That she'll have new friends. Probably your kind tone and voice give such an effect, Victoria said thoughtfully. 2 days later, a miracle happened. Greta opened her eyes. This became another success for the clinic and confirmed Molly's amazing gift. But not everyone was happy about the young team's success. Envious people and competitors began spreading rumors that treatment results were exaggerated. Victoria Goldberg, one newspaper wrote, uses her connections with a rich uncle to promote a dubious drug. Second Chance Clinic, another claimed, is a commercial project, not a medical institution. Victoria was particularly pained by an article accusing her of using children for clinic advertising. Girl Molly is just an advertising gimmick, she read aloud. She has no special gift, and all stories about miraculous healings are fiction. Don't pay attention. Constantine comforted her. There will always be envious people, but they're slandering Molly. She's just a child. Molly is smart enough to understand that people can be different. Molly indeed took the criticism philosophically. Mommy, she said, why do some people get angry when others do good deeds? Because they themselves lack kindness, Helen explained. Then they need medicine for meanness. What medicine would you give them? I'd show them how nice it is to help others. But the slander in the press had consequences. Regulatory agencies began finding fault with the clinic, demanding additional documents and certificates. They're trying to close us down, Constantine said anxiously at a management meeting. On what grounds? Helen protested. Formally, it's based on complaints about violating medical standards. Informally, someone is very annoyed by our success. What can we do? Invite an independent commission of experts, Victoria suggested. Let them study all our cases and give an objective assessment. Good idea, Constantine agreed. Truth is on our side. The commission worked for 2 weeks. Experts studied medical histories, interviewed patients and their relatives, analyzed treatment results. The inspection results are stunning, the commission chairman said at the final meeting. Over the year, the clinic has shown treatment effectiveness at the level of the world's best centers. What about the drug neurogenine? The drug fully complies with international standards. And the girl Molly, one of the inspectors asked. Does she really somehow influence the treatment process? Anne. We conducted a special study, another expert replied. Patients who communicated with Molly Fisher recovered, on average, 30% faster than others. But how can this be explained from a scientific standpoint? And apparently, childish sincerity and kindness really do have a therapeutic effect, the commission chairman suggested. This isn't mysticism but psychology. And Comoma's patients subconsciously feel the emotional tone of communication, so Molly really helps people recover. Absolutely. And her participation in the treatment process can be considered a unique method of psychological rehabilitation. The inspection results were published in all medical journals, and the clinic's critics fell silent, and Victoria and her team's authority grew even higher. We won, Victoria rejoiced. No, Constantine corrected her. Truth won. And Molly, learning about the inspection results, said, now more people will believe that you can treat not only with medicine, but with kindness. That same day, a family from Japan contacted the clinic. Their son had been in a coma for a year, and Japanese doctors couldn't help him. We heard about the American miracle girl, the parent said through an interpreter. Will she help our Hiroshi? Molly isn't a miracle worker, Victoria explained. She's just a very kind child who knows how to find common ground with sick children. We're ready to try any treatment method. When the Japanese family was brought to Molly, the girl was initially confused. I don't speak Japanese, she admitted. That doesn't matter, Helen reassured her. Kindness doesn't need translation. Molly approached the bed of 12-year-old Hiroshi and took his hand. Hi, she said quietly. You came from a very beautiful country. I've been told about Japan's cherry blossoms bloom there, and wise people live there. Surprisingly, the monitors immediately registered a reaction. Hiroshi, Molly continued, your parents are very brave. They brought you to a distant country to help you. That means they love you very, very much. The boy's mother quietly cried, listening to the translation of these words. Do you know what I'll tell you? Molly leaned close to Hiroshi's ear. When you get better, you'll tell me about your country, and I'll tell you about America. The device readings became increasingly active. Hiroshi's treatment lasted 3 weeks. Molly visited him every day, telling him about her school, friends, how beautiful winter was in America. Hiroshi, she said, summer is coming soon. It will be very warm, and we can walk in the park. Wake up and well go, feed the ducks at the pond together. On the 21st day, the boy opened his eyes. Arigato, he whispered weakly, looking at Molly. What does that mean? The girl asked the interpreter. It means thank you. The man smiled. Hiroshi's parents were so grateful that they offered to organize an exchange between American and Japanese clinics. Our hospital would like to study your treatment methods, the boy's father said. And we also invite Molly to visit Japan. To Japan? The girl rejoiced. Really possible? If Mom allows? Constantine smiled. This began a new chapter in Molly's life. She started being invited to different countries, not as a tourist, but as a specialist in child psychological rehabilitation. Mommy, she said before her first trip to Germany, what if I can't help someone? Sunshine, you've already helped many children. But remember, you're not a sorceress, Anne. You're just a kind person who knows how to give hope. Is that enough? Sometimes hope is all a person needs to recover. In Germany, Molly worked with 3 children. 2 of them recovered, and the third showed significant improvements. How do you do it? A German doctor asked her. I just talk to them like ordinary children, Molly replied. I tell them about school, friends, interesting books, that's all. And I also tell them that their parents love them, and that life is beautiful when you're healthy. The doctor wrote these words in his notebook. Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to help someone? Molly thought. You know, Aunt Victoria explained to me in medicine, you can't help everyone, but you also cannot try to help anyone. And these words from the little girl became famous. They were quoted in medical journals and at conferences. When Molly returned to America, a surprise awaited her. And a new sign had appeared at the clinic children's department named after Molly Fisher. Uncle Constantine, what's this for? The girl was embarrassed. So, everyone knows who helped create this department. Constantine replied seriously. But you built everything. Aunt Victoria invented the medicine. Mom treats everyone, and you showed us that medicine isn't just science, but also the art of loving people. That evening, Molly stood for a long time at the window of her room in the new apartment, looking at the clinic lights. Mommy, she called, did I make the right choice? What choice, sweetheart? Helping sick children, instead of just playing and having fun. Helen approached her daughter and hugged her. Molly, do you know what a calling is? No, and it's when a person does what they do best, and at the same time, helps other people. So, my calling is helping children recover. It seems so. But remember, you're still little, and you have a lot of time ahead to understand who you want to become. And for now, I'll help Aunt Victoria and Uncle Constantine. Of course, we're one family. Outside the window, the lights of the night city lit up, while in the little girl's heart burned a warm flame of confidence that she was walking the right path. Another 6 months passed, and Molly was 9 years old and had become a real celebrity in the medical world. Books were written about her, and documentaries were made, and her methods of communicating with coma's children were studied in universities. Molly Victoria said at a festive dinner in honor of the girl's birthday, and I received a proposal from the Norwegian Medical Center. They want to invite you for an internship to Norway. Molly was surprised. What would I do there? Study and work with children. And there's a boy there who no one has been able to help for 2 years. Do his parents agree? Moreover, they themselves asked to invite you. Helen was against such a trip, and Molly is still too young for independent travel, she objected. Mom, Molly said, seriously, what if that boy dies because I didn't go? Sunshine, you can't be responsible for all the sick children in the world. Not for all, but for those I can help. Constantine supported Molly. Helen, the child is right. If she has such a gift, and it would be wrong to hide it, then I'll go with her. Helen decided, of course. Victoria agreed. Family should be together. A month later, the three of them flew to Norway, and the doctors met them with great interest. Molly, the chief physician, Dr. Nielsen, addressed the girl. We've heard a lot about your abilities. I just talk to children, Molly replied modestly, and this helps them recover. Not always, but often. Dr. Nielsen led them to a room where 14-year-old Olaf lay. The boy had been in an accident 2 years ago and had been in deep coma since then. And Olaf loved football very much, his mother told them. He dreamed of becoming a professional player. Molly approached the bed and took the boy's hand. Hi, Olaf, she said quietly. And my name is Molly, and I came from America. Slight changes appeared on the monitors. Olaf, the girl continued, they told me you love football. I love football too. In America, it's a very popular game. And the readings became more active. You know what I'll tell you? Molly leaned close to the boy's ear. When you wake up, you'll be able to play football again. Maybe not professionally, but for pleasure. And Olaf's mother started crying. For 2 years, doctor said, he would never wake up, she whispered. And I think he will, Molly said confidently. He just needs time. The treatment continued for 3 weeks, and Molly visited Olaf every day, telling him about America, her friend's school. Olaf, she said, I have a friend Samuel. He also slept for a long time, then woke up, and now he goes to school and plays football. Norwegian doctors watched with amazement as the device readings gradually improved. This is incredible, the doctor said. In 2 years, we haven't seen such changes. On the 20th day, Olaf opened his eyes. Mom, he called weakly. Olaf? His mother rushed to her son. The boy struggled to turn his head and saw Molly. Who are you? He asked in Norwegian. I'm Molly. They translated for him. From America. Olaf was surprised. Did you come specially to see me? Of course, we're friends now. The story of Olaf's recovery made it to the media. Molly began being called the American Angel, and her method childhood friendship therapy. Miss Molly, the doctor said before their departure, wouldn't you like to stay in Norway? We're ready to create a special training program for you. Thank you, Molly replied, but my home is in America. There are Uncle Constantine and Aunt Victoria there who love me very much. But think about the opportunities here. You could help many more children. There are also sick children in America, and they also need help. The doctor smiled. You're right. But know the doors of our clinic are always open to you. In America, they were met like heroes. Journalists competed for interviews, and the Minister of Health awarded Molly a special medal for service to people. Molly Fisher, the minister, said at the solemn ceremony, at 9 years old, you've done more for medicine than many scientists in their entire lives. I just help children, Molly replied with embarrassment. That's exactly what real service consists of, helping those who need help. 5 years had passed since that first day when little Molly Fisher played hide and seek in the hospital corridors. Now 14 years old, she had become not just a local celebrity, but an internationally recognized specialist in pediatric psychological rehabilitation. The Second Chance Clinic had grown into a major medical center with branches in several states. Victoria's neurogenine had revolutionized the treatment of comose conditions, and thousands of patients around the world had received their second chance at life. Helen, now the director of nursing for the entire medical network, often remembered that May Day, when her daughter first met Konstantin Goldberg. It seemed like a lifetime ago, and yet the warmth of those first moments of their unusual family formation remained as vivid as ever. Mom, Molly said, looking up from her advanced biology textbook. Doctor, Martinez wants me to consider applying to medical school early. She thinks I could start at 16. Helen smiled. Her daughter had indeed grown into a remarkable young woman, brilliant, compassionate, and still possessed of that special gift that had first saved Constantine's life. What do you think? Helen asked. Do you feel ready? I think so. But I want to specialize in both neurology and child psychology. I want to understand the science behind what I do. Constantine, now fully recovered and more energetic than ever, entered the room with Victoria. At 65, he had found a purpose that gave him more satisfaction than all his business ventures combined. Talking about the future, he asked, settling into his favorite chair. Molly might start medical school in 2 years, Helen informed him. Excellent, Constantine beamed. Our foundation has partnerships with the best medical schools in the country. But more importantly, you'll always have a place here, no matter what path you choose. Victoria, now internationally renowned and holder of multiple medical awards, sat beside her uncle. You know, Molly, what you've taught me over these years is that medicine isn't just about drugs and procedures, it's about human connection. That's what you taught me too, Molly replied. Remember when you first explained to me that we can't save everyone, but we have to try to save someone? The four of them sat in comfortable silence, each reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. Outside, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the clinic grounds where the latest wing, the International Center for Consciousness Research, was nearing completion. Do you remember? Constantine said quietly. What I was thinking about when I was in that coma. What? Molly asked. I was thinking that I had lived my whole life accumulating things, money, properties, businesses, but lying there unable to move or speak, I realized that none of it mattered. What mattered was having people who cared whether you lived or died. And now you have us, Molly said simply. Now I have you, Anne. Constantine agreed. And you know what? I've never been richer. Helen reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. Remember when you asked me if we were living in a fairy tale? I still think we are, Anne. Molly laughed. But it's the kind of fairy tale where you have to work hard to make the magic happen. Speaking of magic, Victoria interjected. I have an announcement, Anne. The neurogenine trials have been so successful that the World Health Organization wants to make it available globally, and they've asked our clinic to train specialists from around the world. Anne. That means more children will have hope, Molly said, her eyes lighting up. Hundreds of thousands more, Victoria confirmed. As the evening deepened, they began discussing their plans. Anne. Molly would continue her accelerated studies while working part-time at the clinic. Helen would oversee the expansion of their nursing education programs. Anne. Victoria would lead the international training initiative, and Constantine would ensure that everything was funded and sustainable. You know what I realized? Molly said as they prepared to go home. Anne. That day when I was 6 and playing hide and seek, I thought I was just looking for a good hiding place, but I was actually finding my purpose. Your purpose found you, Constantine corrected gently. Anne. Sometimes, the most important discoveries happen when we're not even looking for them. Later that night, as Molly worked on her advanced placement biology homework, she paused to look out her window at the clinic. The lights were still on in several departments. Doctors and nurses working late to save lives, researchers developing new treatments, and somewhere, families keeping vigil by bedsides, hoping for miracles. She thought about all the children she had helped over the years. Samuel, Greta, Hiroshi, Olaf, and dozens of others. Not all of them had recovered, and those losses had taught her that her gift, whatever it was, had limits. But she had also learned that sometimes hope itself was healing, and that kindness was never wasted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez. Molly, we have a new patient, a 7-year-old girl from Brazil. Her parents specifically requested you. Are you available tomorrow? Molly typed back, of course. What's her name? Isabella. She loves music. Molly smiled and closed her textbook. Tomorrow there would be another child who needed hope, another family searching for a miracle. And she would be there not as a miracle worker, but as a friend who understood that sometimes the most powerful medicine was simply letting someone know they weren't alone. As she drifted off to sleep, Molly thought about the future. Medical school, specialized training, perhaps her own research. But whatever path she chose, she knew she would never forget the lesson she had learned in that hospital room 9 years ago. That every life has value, that families can be chosen as well as born, and that sometimes the smallest voices can speak the most important truths. In the morning, she would wake up and return to the clinic, to the work that had become her calling. There would be Isabella waiting for her, and countless other children in the days and years to come. And Molly Fazar, once a 6-year-old girl playing hide and seek, would continue to help them find their way back to the light. The guardian angel had found her wings, and she was ready to keep flying.